Hello, everybody. Welcome to the We All Suffer podcast. I'm Cameron Straw, and we're here to explore some of life's most challenging questions and offer a space for open and honest conversation. Our podcast is dedicated to a topic that's as old as humanity itself, suffering, a story as old as any, people and their struggle, death and tragedy, war and famine. But is that all there is? These are all inevitable parts of life, so why aren't we equipped or taught about what to do with suffering? Why are we often suffering alone? And very importantly, why aren't we comfortable talking about our suffering with others? And why are they not comfortable hearing about it or talking about it either? We're often afraid of what we don't understand. When we don't take the time to understand our own pain, then we are deathly afraid of other people's. We can't handle it because our emotional capacity is already full of our own junk that we never dealt with. So this podcast is hopefully a place that you can feel safe and understood in some way, even if it's through mine and others sharing. I hope that it also inspires you to share with someone you trust and know cares, and to express yourself more, to pray and talk about these struggles more. As the saying goes, everyone's fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And I believe that and feel that deeply. So although I do not know what you're feeling, I feel too, so I feel you. So thank you for listening. And before we begin today, please note that the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician and other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this podcast. So with that said, let's dive into today's discussion. I'm joined by my beautiful wife, Courtney, and we're going to be talking about our health issues and health struggles that we've gone throughout our life. Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, what's your vision and what's your purpose for this?
Man, I think it's going to help me with my sleep. I think it's going to help me process my sleep stuff more, because I'll be able to be comfortable enough to speak and also to articulate the pains and things that I go through on a daily basis, and be able to have to do something consistent. And I think that helps to talk about things. I think it's healthy, just like the insight you got the other day about if you don't say the thing, your body's going to speak for you, kind of thing. And it can be, I think it's similar for everybody. I think we need to articulate it, but I also think it's inspiring, and I think it can help people. And I think it's the Jesus thing to do, because I do think people can be helped. And I think that's what we're here to do ultimately, we're supposed to help people. And so I could suffer alone in silence in my little corner of the world, or I could share about it and learn and talk about what we're learning and see what that does for people. Yeah. That's kind of, well, I don't think what?
I think the fact that when you bring it up to people, someone usually has a personal or connected story that relates to you too, which is surprising, not surprising that so many people do suffer from sleep troubles. So
and all kinds of chronic issues, right? Like people suffer.
Right.
That's the thing.
True.
And
that's
you do
the
too.
Point.
You do as well. What do your socks say, real quick?
They say proud plant parent. I'm a proud plant parent.
I just have to say for the record that my wife has socks on that says proud plant parent, and there's a potted plant. And that's
I love
why
plants, and hence being in the garden today on a beautiful Seattle day where everybody needs to live here, but don't live here because you would ruin it. But Seattle's awesome in the summer.
Yeah, only we can come up here and ruin it.
Exactly.
Nobody else can.
Transplants.
Except we're not ruining it. We're just assimilating in
we're becoming who we were meant to be. ultimately.
I think we were already those people.
We
and then
were
we just found
P&W people.
Our place in the world, sort of. Yeah. So what about you? What's your
purpose for
or just
this,
the vision
or
and the really good thoughts about why you'd want to get on a microphone and embarrass yourself?
Well,
not saying that, you know what I mean.
Ultimately, I don't. Correct. But I think similarly that I want to do two things. One is I think this is actually personally healing for myself and getting my own thoughts and experiences out there. I feel like the more you talk about things and the more you can, even this being a processing space is so beneficial to helping me work through my experiences and like naming things. I think there is scientific evidence for naming troubles, but I mean, I'd have to look up that research, but when
the healing power of naming things.
Yeah, that's why people write. That's why people write books. That's why people share their stories. I think it's actually part of the process. And then, yeah, I think being an English teacher, I like that idea too of putting experiences out there. And I think we need to hear each other's stories. And like you said, I do think people are looking to connect and share what they've been through. And it really does me a huge service when I find out that someone's gone through something similar. You know, the person who has lost someone, they can ultimately connect the most deeply to someone who has also lost someone because they know that experience. Even if there's differences in that trouble or that suffering, but
no, that makes complete sense. I thank you for sharing that, and I thank you for bringing up that sharing this experience and our experiences of suffering and pain is a part of the healing process, because I don't think I mentioned that earlier, and I do believe that to be true. And yeah, I think it would be helpful for us to just share our stories. And I think not because we're experts on suffering or whatever, we're not trying to compare our suffering. I don't think that's helpful for anyone to do, compare anyone's suffering to anyone else's. And I don't think we're qualified because we've experienced so much pain or something. I think we're qualified because we're humans and we experience this thing called life that everybody else is experiencing that would be ever listening to this. And I think, if we can shed some light through our experiences and our healing processes on the record, maybe that someone can glean some insight and be able to hopefully help them along their healing journey. I think we're just today going to stick with our health history, but
cool.
I think it's a relevant topic because I Googled, and there's 129 million estimated Americans with chronic health conditions.
Whoa.
And that's
129 million?
Correct.
Wow.
Which is nearly half. Yeah.
Whoa.
It's nearly half the population in America. And I think that's pretty accurate because nearly half the people in the country is what that is. And I don't know if that's including mental health conditions. I didn't go super hard on the Googling, and it does. I think we all know the numbers are high in general for mental health and chronic health issues. I don't think anyone's going to argue that. And I'm not trying to get crazy statistical with all the stuff on this episode, but we're no exception. We're one of the number of millions that have this chronic health issues. I've had chronic digestive issues since before I could remember. I've struggled with mental health issues. I think they're all related. But we'll get to that later. Chronic inflammatory issues. And apparently my mom told me somewhat recently in the last, 5 or 6 years that she's like, oh yeah, she remembers taking me to the ER when I was like 3 for like digestive issues. And
Aww.
Sorry, graphic trigger warning coming for people that don't like talking about poop.
Poop
I
alert.
I definitely had I guess I had such big poops that I couldn't poop it out.
Aww.
Which is kind of sad to think about, because that was my story as a younger kid. And I just remember feeling embarrassed because I had siblings that would make fun of me. Namely, one sibling would make fun of me, older sibling. That made me insecure as a kid, because I was just like, oh, I'm constipated. And then I remember feeling insecure and embarrassed because I was always liked girls, and there was a babysitter, and I have a crush. Is that a guy? I think that's just a little kid thing.
That's
at least a little
normal.
boy thing.
Yeah.
I had crushes on all my babysitters. But my babysitter, anyways, comes over. I can't even remember her name. I think it was Elizabeth. Sorry, Elizabeth, for telling this story. But I had a total crush on Elizabeth. Came into the kitchen. My mom's explaining to her all the things she needs to do for me while she's babysitting me, and she goes to the cupboard, takes out these fiber cookies, and said, "These are Cameron's special cookies."
Oh.
And I was so embarrassed because I'm like, Mom, she
knows my weakness.
Yeah, you're telling this girl that I have a crush on that I'm constipated.
Problems.
And so that was my earliest memory that I can think of, that knowing I had an issue.
To have challenges even.
Yeah, I think that was probably like 1st or 2nd grade. But that was, do you have a memory for you?
Well, yes. I think my earliest health actually related issues was all throughout elementary school, because I have asthma, and my neighbor had 3 cats, and I'm deathly allergic to cats. And it's horrible when maybe as a parent you have to tell your kid you can't go over to your friend's house who literally lives next door. So I would love to hang out with my neighbor Kenny along with my sisters, but he had 3 cats at his house. And so anytime we would still sneak over there and want to play and, build trains and make random things with his dad's carpentry in the garage. But basically anytime I did that, I would have an asthma attack later that evening, and my lungs would close up, and I'd have to go to the hospital. And I never was in the hospital for less than a week. And this happened, I believe, about 5 occasions. I would have to stay in the hospital. They needed to put me on nebulizer, which would help my lungs to open up. I believe it is steroids, or to just basically help you to breathe again. But because I was so little and so young, they had to stabilize me. The youngest was, I think, also similarly maybe 3 years old. I could be getting the age wrong, but
at 3 going to the hospital.
But it might be
asthma?
a memory my mom has.
Sure.
Told me.
But when do you were real little?
I really remember 3rd grade was the biggest memory that I went to the hospital for.
Got it.
That again.
So you would go. So what would these asthma attacks look like? You would just all of a sudden start wheezing?
Yeah, usually I went to bed, but then I'd wake up without being able to breathe. I'd start wheezing and feel like my lungs are closing up, and I had my special little blanket that I would always hold on tightly to, and I think I would get my parents or something and tell them, hey, I can't really breathe, my lungs are closing up, and they would rush me to the ER, and I'd have to wait in the ER, and it'd be middle of the night, and they'd take me in, and then the doctors would put me on an IV, and they'd put the nose, what are those things called that help you to breathe? Breathing tubes into your nose, or they had, when you were little, they didn't have the little nose ones because you couldn't really keep them in. They had the whole mask that they'd put on you, that they put on people when they looks like what falls out of the airplane when it's pressurized. It doesn't happen very often, but
so you
would put that on me, and I just would be in the hospital trying to get air.
Oh, poor little Court. But you said for no less than a week. I'm like, how long did it take your lungs to open up? That's kind of concerning. Is that really weird how it was?
Because
didn't you feel like you almost died? Didn't you say that you would like almost die from cats?
Yes,
so
when you can't breathe, you're on the verge of maybe passing out at that point. It's like trying to breathe. It's when they do those smoke activities where you're breathing through a straw. That's exactly how it felt to breathe.
Oh wow! So you were like, and they didn't.
And then I think I just was so little. They needed to stabilize me essentially.
And you weren't stable until like a week.
My
later.
body was just so weak. I think is ultimately. I'm thinking back now, and I don't fully remember being in the hospital for a week, but I do remember being there for at least a few days, and then people would come.
Either way,
people would come visit.
Traumatic.
I have all these pictures of me in the hospital. There was like a photographer one year, and they took a picture of me.
Being a little sick
in a little
person.
like hospital gown.
That's sad. So you remember going there a lot. You would go to the hospital a lot.
So elementary school was many memories of being in the hospital, and on top of that, because my asthma was so bad, I had to get shots a lot. So you got allergy shots, which was a kind of a big thing, I feel like, during the 90s.
Yeah.
But
so you got shots, you had that inhaler.
Yeah.
You went to the hospital, and did you lose count of how many times you went to the hospital, or did you go all the time? Like you went a lot.
At this point, it was enough to not really remember the different times.
Yeah, it started blurred together. You went, what, you talking about a handful of times, more than a dozen
Probably
times?
Like 5 times.
Five times in your little, a little one.
5 times from 1 to 10 years old.
Okay. But that's still, so you clearly had some asthmatic issues, and you tried to stay away from cats, but you couldn't always do that. And was there anything else that would trigger it, or was it just that cat situation?
Generally, it seemed just the cats. My parents told me I was allergic to the trees that were in our backyard. And so every season when we had to trim the trees, my family didn't make me chop them. And everybody else had to go clean up and chop the trees. So that was kind of nice.
Got to avoid some chores. So I know, because I'm your husband, and I don't know if we, I guess I could maybe say that earlier. Did we say that we're husband and wife? Because
nope,
we didn't really mention that.
I can communicate.
I can retroactively put that in the intro or whatever. I can probably put that in there. But yes, I know these things a little bit because we're married, and I figured out the hard way actually with you having kind of an allergy to hospitals in general. You're just a little afraid of hospitals, or it brings these.
Hospitals are a tad traumatic for me nowadays.
Yeah. So you get queasy and pass out if you go to a hospital. We learned that.
Yes.
When you came to pick me up.
Do you want to share that time?
Well, I don't know if it'll be a little long-winded. I don't want to get into all our stories as much as I want to get into
Let's just say you had to be there, and I wanted to come visit you. And it was a bad idea because then I needed the hospital.
Yeah. Courtney was trying to visit me in the hospital as a patient, and she ended up becoming a patient almost. But anyways, there's clearly this has affected you, but then you started having digestive issues as well. Do you remember when that started?
Yeah. So that's the origin of my health. But I would say when it comes to something we're dealing with right now and digestion, that all originated during my middle school years. And a little bit of warning for the commentary on the gut, but I basically during my middle school years had terrible, basically IBS. The doctor never wanted to identify it as IBS, which I still don't understand why. But all those symptoms, was just needed a bathroom all the time, completely uncontrolled, like gut issues. And it was miserable because you're in middle school, and kind of like your story of being a little kid, it's horrifying. It's totally embarrassing, and no one talks about their gut. And the way my family handled it was, without knowing much about the gut, my mom just gave me Imodium, which would basically just make me diarrhea all the time.
Because that's a laxative, right?
Yeah. And it was just basically a time in my life that all I remember was trying to survive and get my homework turned in, because I was a bit of a perfectionist, especially at that time. Family was kind of going through some ups and downs with mental health that was in my family. And then I was trying to handle this gut stuff, not knowing what in the world to do. And we didn't really identify nutrition as a possible impact, but looking back, I would probably tell my past self, like, maybe take some things out of your diet, but a lot of processed foods and such. But yeah, it was a rough time. I basically lived in the bathroom, and to the point where it was making me question life.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
It was affecting your mood and giving you were depressed. You were like getting like suicidal.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was tough.
That was in junior high?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I forgot about that part. That you were, because you were just like, do you feel like, looking back, it was, I mean, I think it's all connected. Was it because of what you were going through, or because of what, or was it like because your gut was so jacked up, it was making your mental health jacked up too?
That's a good question. I think two things. One, I can look back now and have a whole advanced perspective about it, I would say, than back then.
Right.
But
you were just in it back then, just feeling
hopeless. I think there was a mix of things. I think the biggest thing that still stands with me is that I just felt in so much pain that I just wanted the pain to go away. I didn't know how to get rid of pain. And I didn't really know how to process that pain either. Yeah. Didn't really have a place I could talk about it. I mean, my parents, mainly my mom, knew what was happening to me physically, but I didn't really have a place to express how stressed out that was creating for me.
I get that. And we're talking about the 90s, and I remember that was a different time in terms of mental health awareness.
Oh, yes.
I think, so I don't blame my parents either, but yes, there was a lack of understanding. We were kind of the first generation that was pushed Adderall and all these different things. And I know we didn't take that, but a lot of my friends did. And I think I got really depressed, and I think now looking back, I think it was because of the inflammatory issues that I was experiencing with histamine and everything, but also these gut issues. And yeah, I remember being suicidal in junior high as well, middle school. And yeah, I think similar to you, wanting just things to feel different, and didn't know how to get my body and everything to feel different. So it was just, and by then I guess I was still having gut issues, but I didn't realize it. I just was like, oh, I knew it wasn't normal to have like a whole loaf of bread sized deuce come out of you, but my friends would like, it was like a funny thing to my friends. But for me, it was just kind of like, oh, this is something I live with now. And so I don't really know if I even thought I had a health problem, but I remember, definitely feeling like I had depression, even though I didn't get like formally diagnosed. But I remember bringing it up to family members that I forgot about this actually, but my parents reminded me, but essentially I brought it up to them that I was suicidal, and they laughed and they felt bad later, but they just couldn't believe you know, based on the limited understanding back then, that they're like, you're just like all the other kids. Why would you be considering this? But so they didn't really know what to do with it or take it seriously. And they felt really bad about that later. But
was that a moment for you that you realized that your mental health was different, or had you already kind of sensed something being off?
I think that was just a moment that I spoke up about, like, hey, I'm having these thoughts and this seems like a thing. And they, you know, just didn't know what to do with that. But I think, I don't remember if I knew it was different or whatever. I guess I did. I just remember being, you know, in my room alone, pouty and super depressed mode, and just kind of, I think that's a new word, depresh mode. It's like Depeche Mode, like the band. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what that experience really was like outside of just being completely hopeless. But I think the thing that I remember helping me back then to not, you know, try to take my life was essentially that I had the hope that things would get better. I was like, this is going to get better someday. And I'm glad I thought that, because and it has, although I still have struggles that we can get into more current present day stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think that was something that was really helpful. And the mental health stuff definitely resolved it. It was nothing like that I've experienced in, you know, since my early 20s, really. I'm 30, almost 37 now. So I think it's a big difference, but now I'm struggling with sleep issues, which can present a lot like depression, anxiety, and have similar symptoms. So I have sleep apnea, and that's a struggle. So it's a whole whirlwind, but it's always something, I feel like. And and I think I didn't really consciously take it on, and maybe that's something we can talk about, because I think I didn't know or do anything about my health outside of self-medicate with, you know, I guess smoking weed, drinking alcohol, binge drinking, you know, in high school, and smoking every day for a couple years, 2 or 3 years in there, from maybe 16 to 18, 19. But
so you would say that's kind of how you handled part of that experience going into high school became about eliminating those negative feelings and turning to these other things.
Trying to, yeah. I think that was my little escape, amongst other things. And, you know, I mean, I guess I could just talk about it. I mean, pornography was definitely rampant back then too, from like a very young age until, struggled with that for a long time. And so I think that was also a numbing kind of escape route for me to not feel the emotions that I was going through. And then I think, you know, in my 20s and things, then I started experimenting and with diet, and you know, spiritually got more, you know, had a transformation reading the Bible. But
yeah, now you're very invested in understanding health and mental health and nutrition. How did that happen based on, did any of that connect to your own experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely an interest there, probably because of that, just subconsciously or unconsciously. But I got encouraged by my uncle. I think he was the first one, my Uncle Phil, to be like, hey, you should go, you know, you clearly are interested in this. You should go study this out more and go to school for it or something. So I started studying nutrition and different holistic healing modalities and Chinese medicine and, you know, Western herbs and different things. And that's kind of what led me down that way. But even then, I didn't think I was really sick, and I didn't even know the mental health was connected to gut health and
this
the
is
body.
Even in college?
This is in college. Oh. This is before I went to college. This is before I went to college for the degree. So I didn't know the connection really. And so until I went to college for it, and then I was like, oh, I'm really sick, because then I got a gut infection. So then I was like, I did all these diets because I was just curious, and so I did like vegan and vegetarian, and then that really jacked me up. And I kind of just watched a documentary. I didn't know what I was doing of why I went to do that. I didn't have any like good research outside of someone telling me this is the good thing for you. And so doing that, and then getting really sick, actually, I got a big gut infection from eating raw dairy. And then I kind of had to look ahead in my textbook when I was going to school at Bowman College in Berkeley to figure out what's wrong with my gut, because doctors didn't have answers outside of antibiotics. And it was like, okay, I think you have inflammatory bowel disease, but we don't, here's some antibiotics. So I knew that wasn't the answer. And so I looked and did a lot of different things to get my body to where I was able to not have diarrhea every day, because that's what was going on back then. It's like a year and a half of like intense bowel issues. That was the opposite of how I grew up. So it went from constipation to diarrhea all the time. So that was so I thought I was going to die. This was like 25, 26, something like that. And then and then I was able to heal miraculously, I guess, through dietary interventions and whatnot. And then I figured out, maybe when I was 30, I had these histamine issues paired with that, which was a whole nother part of the gut.
We love the histamine
issues. No, you're dealing with your histamine issues now. So,
yes.
So that was a thing, and needing to that. And then I went carnivore. So I did pretty much everything from vegan to carnivore, paleo. I tried FODMAPs. I tried, autoimmune paleo protocol, keto, all these different things. And then I eventually did carnivore, and that really helped my gut issues. I did a low histamine carnivore situation, and then all my symptoms subsided. But then I realized I had sleep apnea, and probably had that since I was 16, 15, maybe a year earlier.
Wow.
But I started waking up consciously during those apnea events, and then I had to figure that out. And that's been a 4 or 5 year journey, and I'm still having a hard time getting sleep. So that sucks.
That's the tough part, I feel like, about chronic, is the word chronic. It's right. That it's ongoing over and over. But you have been someone that I personally admire in how much you pursue more and more knowledge and more insight, and are willing to look a little bit behind the typical ideas to find answers, right, or potential answers. But how do you keep going after answers? Because like one thing that's really challenging about chronic health is you don't feel good, and then you're expected to get yourself out of the pit. Like, how do you do that for yourself?
No, I mean, that's hard. And I don't know if I'm the best example, but I feel like I've learned over the years that you have to advocate for yourself. Sadly, nobody, most people aren't going to understand, but there are practitioners out there. There are answers. There are people with answers. But then sometimes, you can't, it takes years to figure it out. And I don't know, I think God being someone who's central in my life, I think has helped me kind of understand the suffering more, which is really why I want to start this podcast. I think I'm inspired to kind of understand and communicate why we suffer and what to do about it. And I think this is just one area of suffering and pain that I've experienced, and I think that's helped me kind of turn to God more and understand the spiritual side of things, instead of just relying on my body and this flesh sack, if you will, to kind of do everything for me, because it doesn't work sometimes for me. And then so kind of understanding that there's another side, and there's different energy to tap into when my brain's not functioning, when in the way I want it to, or I'm tired, or my my gut's not working and whatever. And these things can be kind of debilitating, but finding hope, through the scriptures, through the example of Jesus and all of that, I think is ultimately what's helped. But I appreciate that, question and your encouraging words there. I think I'm curious for you as well. I know you're still going through things. We both are, which is why we're recording this right now. I think I have sleep issues that I'm still, even post, I got jaw surgery, which was, in hindsight, probably not the best idea, even though it helped about 50%. That's my big struggle these days. Although my gut issues and all those stuff kind of seem to subside.
Yeah.
Now I have these sleep issues that are more pronounced than ever. For you, you had IBS growing up, and now you're having kind of symptoms.
Somewhat went away in a sense. Maybe just got like masked for a few 10 years. And and I kind of always chalked it up to like doing cross country and eating a little bit more maybe of a balanced diet, and life kind of maturing through maybe puberty. I didn't notice extreme gut issues at the time.
It wasn't what it was when you were
Correct.
a kid.
But now, in the past 3-4 years, I've had really bad reactions to food, to similarly, where it's just, diarrhea is not something you want on a consistent basis. And to those of you out there, if you're experiencing that, definitely look into it. Because I wasn't the person to go, what's going on? I just kind of walked through life a little bit tolerating uncomfortability, and it's like there's things that you should tolerate with uncomfortability. Bad digestion is not one of them.
Right. And I think that's true. That's like one of the things that a lot of people just kind of go through life like, this is normal, but their normal is really way down here.
Yes.
That they could know how good they could feel.
It could be so much better.
Yeah. And you've gotten some relief, but you're also in the midst of it, and it's not easy to have to change diet stuff. And so for you, similar question, what has helped you lately in the last couple of years, and maybe even in recent months, to keep going, to look for answers, to not just quit and go, whatever, screw it, I'm just going to eat some Taco Bell?
Yeah, I was staring at the Taco Bell building the other day.
Really?
But more like, I would be miserable if I ever stepped foot in one of those again. No, what have I done, or what has been part of that journey? I feel like definitely experiencing pain and being uncomfortable and finally recognizing like it doesn't have to feel like this has forced me a little bit, maybe more than I voluntarily wanted to change this and wanted to work on it. But at the same time, that hope of it could be better did make me open to, let's try these things. What I'm doing right now is not working. And I think when we started talking about different ideas, and you're big on research and looking at peer-reviewed studies and all that, and those resources are super helpful when you start looking into, what are some things that could work? What are some things that are going on? Because I have felt that, maybe on the doctor side, and this is no knock to doctors, they're doing what they can, but sometimes they just agree with me, and I'm cool with that if that's the right answer. But I also am kind of hoping and curious for someone that's going to want to dive deeper and learn more about like what is going on with this person's body, because we're all different, and how cool is it to find out what uniquely is impacting this one person. So I think I had to be willing to do some of my own research and also just try, because it could be better. And I think that vision for something that could be better helped. And like you said, I mean, God is a huge part of our life. God has been somebody I go to for answers and go to for comfort. And in this process, this has also not been just a process of like nutrition and figuring out what's wrong with my gut by what I'm eating, but also what I am absorbing mentally. And that's also been kind of a huge breakthrough for me personally in the past year, especially huge breakthrough in the past 2 months of recognizing the mental impact that our body connects to our brain. And the gut and the brain are related, and you need both of those to be healthy in order for your body to be healthy. And for me, I've been realizing that if I had stopped listening to some of the signs from my mind to speak up and to be my own person, that my body had to do the talking for me. And unfortunately, the only way it can get my attention is by lashing out at itself. So
yeah, that's so deep. I mean, I think thank you for sharing that. And it has been very amazing insight that you've gotten recently to kind of understand, and the breakthroughs you've gotten in your health as a result of understanding that. I always say you're not an emoji, so don't like cut your head off from your body. Like it's all connected.
Right. Yes.
And I think
which
people don't know that. Yeah.
Special shout out to therapy and my current read of The Lord Is My Courage by KJ Ramsey, which have both been recently a big part in this development as well. But
yeah, no, I mean, those are great. And I love therapy as well. And that book sounds really cool, and I want to read it as well. I've only gotten snippets and listened to her interviews, but that really good book on all the spiritual stuff that we'll get into another episode in terms of the kind of craziness that we've gone through on that front. But yeah, I think the health issues, are abounding in our life, but it's not, just a sob story. I think we're really trying to fight to have faith, have hope through this time, and get answers and continually. I think the thing we were just talking about earlier, before we jumped on the pressed record or whatever, is just both of us needing to also just submit to whatever God wants for us, because I can be controlling in the sense that I want to be, done with my sleep issues and I just want to get better. And I know you can feel that way sometimes too, in a different way. And we were communicating about fear around it. And I think, because sleep for me, I have looked at research, and when you don't get good sleep, it just jacks up I've gained 30 pounds in the last 5 years, maybe more, maybe 30, 35 in the last 4 to 5 years. And it's really due to poor metabolic health as a result of interrupted sleep. And nothing else really changed in my diet in that time to account for the weight gain. And it's not just the weight gain, but there's risks for heart disease and then all types of other things that come with sleep apnea that I'm not super stoked on and can be a little fearful about when I'm not really praying through it, and also trusting that God's got a plan. He's going to help me. He's already helped me a lot. My sleep is not as bad as it was even a year or two ago, but it's still challenging, and having to navigate that with God is part of what I think this podcast is. I really want this to be about, and helping people learn from not only us and other people that we interview on this podcast, hopefully, but also biblical stories, art, movies, TV, anything we see in kind of the realm of pain and suffering and grief and tragedy, and what to do about that, and how to, live with it, and how to get through it in this term of suffering well. I want to learn how to go through it.
I like that.
Yeah, in the right way, in the best way possible. in the most spiritual way. And I think Jesus is the ultimate example of that. And that is who inspires me the most, because he obviously had the most, gruesome death and did that. And we're going to get into all that. But I think there's a lesson, there's many lessons to learn through his life and all these other people's lives that we can learn from and how they went through that. And so I think that's probably a good place for us to stop, because I'm ultimately tired, but also, I think we can continue. There's we could even break this up into multiple episodes in terms of maybe more responses on our health, because I want to focus on health stuff for a little bit, but we could maybe get more into the mental health aspects. I want to ask you more about what you're learning, and I want to share more about my experiences with mental health as well, because I think that's deserves more time. And
these are deep waters.
Yes. So we just want to give an update on, and more, not an update, but just a introduction on who we are and what we've struggled with from on an overview, just kind of our health. And so hopefully that's a good just kickoff. And thanks for listening. And we'll see you here next time, or we'll hear you here next time, or you'll hear us here next time. See you later.
No, because it did shift into a different feeling all of a sudden. And I know we were trying to avoid that, but
I don't think it got.
No, go ahead.
This is still warm up though.
Okay.
I'm more like, let's talk about why we want to do this.
Okay, can I just say that one thing on my mind is that to plan our road trip, but I'm here now. Okay, let's talk about this.
Yes, we need to plan a road trip. We should just always conversate on the record.
We should. Then we would find out. Oh, I should have got you water. Who actually was right about things for the record. And actually for the record. That's horrible. Podcast. For the record.